Most people think ancient Egypt was all pyramids and gold. But if you were dropped there for just one day, you probably wouldn't survive it. The heat alone could kill you. Fresh water was limited. Disease spread fast. And medicine was little more than prayers and guesswork. One wrong step could mean punishment. One illness could mean death. And if you weren't born into the right class, survival wasn't guaranteed. This wasn't the Egypt of museums and textbooks. It was a world of brutal labor, strict laws, dangerous animals, and constant risk. In this video, we're breaking down exactly why modern humans wouldn't last a single day in ancient Egypt. From the environment, to the diseases, to the rules that could end your life instantly. This is the reality they don't show you. Tonight, we step backward through time, not by decades or centuries, but by thousands of years, to the banks of the Nile. This is a world often remembered for towering pyramids, golden masks, and gods carved in stone. A civilization wrapped in mystery, symmetry, and divine order. But beneath that polished image lived millions of ordinary people whose daily reality was far less glorious. Tonight, the question is simple. What would it actually be like to survive just one ordinary day in ancient Egypt? Before you settle in, before you imagine quiet temples and cool river breezes, understand this: the sun is already awake, and it is not gentle. Before your eyes open, daylight is forcing its way into your home, not through glass, not through curtains, but straight through gaps in a reed and mud structure designed more to exist than to protect. There is no shade to negotiate with the morning, no walls thick enough to hold back heat. The sun rises fast here, and when it does, it claims everything it touches. You sleep on a straw mat laid directly on packed earth. A thin linen sheet rests over you, light enough to breathe through, light enough to do almost nothing else. By the time you stir, your skin already feels warm, as if the day has been waiting for you to catch up. The breeze people talk about when they describe the Nile is absent. Whatever movement the air once had has long since surrendered to the heat. By the time you step outside, the temperature has already climbed to a level modern people would consider extreme. And it is still early. The sun here does not simply shine. It presses. It settles into fabric, into skin, into bone. Linen clothing, the best option available, hangs loosely against your body, offering airflow, but no defense. It absorbs light rather than reflecting it. It does not shield. It reminds you how exposed you are. There is no sunscreen, no shade structures, no wide-brimmed hats passed out for comfort. Protective oils exist, yes, but they are expensive and reserved for the wealthy, priests, or those working inside temples. If you are an ordinary person, you rely on improvisation. Mud, animal fat, whatever, can dull the bite of the sun just enough to make survival possible. Effectiveness is uncertain. The sun does not negotiate. As the morning advances, the ground itself begins to radiate heat. Stone paths and packed earth warm rapidly, transferring their temperature directly into bare feet. Shade becomes something you search for instinctively. A wall, a cart, the narrow shadow cast by a structure that was never meant to be beautiful, only functional. Even these shelters grow warm. Everything absorbs the same relentless energy, and this heat is not seen as random or unfortunate. In ancient Egypt, the sun is not weather, it is authority. Ra, the sun god, moves across the sky each day as a visible reminder of divine power. The intensity of the heat is not a flaw in the system. It is proof that the system is working. If the day is brutal, It is because the god is strong. Complaining is not encouraged. Discomfort is interpreted as participation in a cosmic order far larger than the individual. Endurance is not admired for its own sake, but because survival itself is an act of alignment with divine will. You are not supposed to escape the sun. You are supposed to endure it. By mid-morning, your body has already begun conserving energy. Movement becomes economical. Every task is measured against effort and exposure. You sweat continuously, but hydration is uncertain. Water exists, but safety is another matter. Relief will come later, briefly, and with consequences of its own. Surviving a single day here already requires adaptation. Not courage, not heroism, just tolerance. Tolerance for heat that does not fade, for light that does not soften, and for a world where nature and divinity are indistinguishable forces. And this is still only the beginning of the day. Eventually, necessity pushes you forward. You cannot remain indoors. The day will not pause for adjustment. There is water to collect, work to begin, and a body that will not sustain itself without movement. The Nile is close, close enough that its presence defines everything about this civilization. Close enough that you can smell it before you see it. The river is sacred. Everyone knows that. It feeds the land, determines the harvest, and dictates the rhythm of the year. Without it, Egypt does not exist. But reverence does not make it pleasant. As you approach the banks, the air thickens with humidity, decay, and life packed tightly together. Fish, reeds, insects, livestock, and people all occupy the same narrow margin between land and water. This is where you wash. There are no private baths, no soaps, no cleansers, no scented oils, unless you belong to a class that does not need to carry water on its head. Instead, you step into the river as it is. You scoop water with your hands. You scrub your skin using sand, coarse and abrasive, because that is what is available. It removes dirt in the same way stone removes rust. Effectively, but without comfort, clothing is treated the same way. Linen garments are beaten against rocks at the river's edge, the impact loosening grime while the current carries it away. You do this quickly. The water is shared, and not just with other people. Crocodiles are not myth here. They are residents. So are parasites, insects, and whatever waste flows downstream from settlements you will never see. This water is considered clean enough because there is no alternative. You rinse. You emerge. You feel marginally less sticky and far more alert to the vulnerability of your body. Privacy does not exist in this process. Families bathe together. Neighbors pass by. Animals drink beside you. The river is communal in every sense of the word. Once the jars are filled, they are lifted, balanced, and carried back toward home. The clay containers grow heavier with every step. The sun continues to climb. The ground reflects it upward. The effort required for basic hygiene is already draining energy meant for labor. Breakfast follows, not as a pleasure, but as preparation. You sit low, either on a simple stool or directly on the ground. The meal is repetitive because survival favors reliability. Bread dominates everything. Dense loaves made from barley or emmer wheat, ground between stone slabs that leave behind fine grit. You taste it with every bite. It is not seasoning. It is evidence of the process. The bread is filling. It has to be. It is fuel, not indulgence. Alongside it is beer. Thick, cloudy, barely fermented, more like a drinkable porridge than anything modern drinkers would recognize. Children drink it. Adults rely on it. Not for pleasure. but because it is safer than untreated water. The brewing process kills what the river does not. Calories matter more than flavor. If fortune favors you, there may be an onion, a handful of dates, or a small portion of dried fish. Protein is inconsistent. Meat is rare. Most animals are more valuable alive than eaten. You chew slowly. Flies gather immediately. You swat them away with one hand and keep eating with the other. This is normal. No one lingers over the meal. Rest is inefficient. The body must be fed just enough to continue functioning. Soon, work will claim the rest of the day, and it will not wait. Because in ancient Egypt, survival is not passive. It is earned repeatedly through motion, through labor, and through submission to a system that does not care whether you are tired. And the sun, still climbing, is watching. Work begins without ceremony. There is no signal, no announcement, no moment where the day officially shifts from living to labor. It simply happens because it must. In ancient Egypt, work is not a choice. It is the condition for continuing to exist. If you are a farmer, your day is spent close to the ground. Ankles sink into damp soil near the river's edge as you pull weeds, tend barley, or prepare fields under the supervision of someone whose authority is never questioned. Tools are basic wooden plows, stone blades, hands hardened by repetition. The work is slow, heavy, and relentless. Pain is expected. Fatigue is ignored. If you are a laborer, the demands escalate. Stone must be moved, not decorative pieces, but massive blocks destined for temples, tombs, and monuments that will outlast you by millennia. Ramps of packed earth and gravel replace modern machinery. Bare feet grip uneven surfaces. A stumble is not a minor inconvenience. It can end your usefulness permanently. Injuries are not accommodated. They are absorbed by the system. Overseers watch closely. Their role is not encouragement, but enforcement. Quotas matter more than comfort. Falling behind is not interpreted as weakness. It is treated as failure. Grain rations depend on productivity. Miss the mark, and the consequences follow quickly. Hunger is an efficient motivator. For those assigned to tomb construction, the irony is impossible to ignore. You carve chambers meant to preserve eternity for someone else, while your own body deteriorates in real time. Mistakes are dangerous. A poorly cut surface is not just an error. It is a disruption of divine order. Accountability is absolute. Women work no less. Domestic labor is constant and physically demanding. Grain must be ground by hand, a process that strains shoulders and spine. Water is hauled repeatedly. Linen is woven. Food prepared. Children managed, and animals tended. Field work is added whenever needed. Rest appears in brief, accidental moments rather than scheduled breaks. There is no separation between labor and survival. They are the same thing. Above all of this stands authority, embodied in a single figure you will likely never see. The pharaoh is not merely a ruler. He is divine by definition, the living incarnation of cosmic balance, chosen by the gods to maintain order. His presence is everywhere, carved into walls, stamped onto objects, invoked in rituals. His image appears larger than all others for a reason. Size is hierarchy made visible. Questioning him is unthinkable. Complaining about the system he oversees is not dissent. It is sacrilege. If the harvest fails, the fault is not divine. It is human. Someone did not pray enough. Someone disrupted balance. Blame moves downward, never up. Religion does not exist separately from daily life. It is embedded in every action. Before eating, offerings are made. Before sleeping, prayers are spoken. Illness is never just physical. Misfortune is never random. Every outcome carries spiritual weight. By now, the environment itself feels hostile. Sand infiltrates everything. It settles into clothing, coats, skin, works its way into food. Bread carries grit from stone-grinding surfaces. Over years, this wears teeth down to flat, polished remnants. Houses made of mud brick offer little resistance. Wind enters freely, bringing dust with it. Even rest is abrasive. Medical care exists, but it operates at the intersection of observation and belief. Treatments combine herbs, honey, and recited spells. Some remedies help by accident or early understanding. Others do nothing. Surgery happens when necessary, without anesthesia. Pain is endured because there is no alternative. Injuries fester. Infections spread. Life expectancy reflects this reality. Reaching middle age is an achievement. Childhood itself is uncertain. And yet, death is not feared in the way a modern mind might expect. It is planned for meticulously. What matters most is not how long you live, but how you are judged afterward. When life ends, the real test begins. The heart is weighed against the feather of truth. A life lived out of balance carries consequences that extend beyond the grave. Those with resources prepare extensively. Tombs are stocked with goods, texts, and symbolic servants. The poor make do with what they can. Inequality follows you into death as faithfully as it governs life. Even then, rest is not guaranteed. Tombs are robbed, names are erased. Eternity proves fragile. By the time the sun finally lowers, your body is spent. Dust covers you. Muscles ache. The day has taken everything it intended to take, and tomorrow will ask the same again, without apology. This is not romantic. It is not gentle. It is survival structured into ritual, labor, and belief. And for millions, it was normal. As night approaches, the heat loosens its grip, but never fully releases you. The air cools slightly, enough to make movement tolerable again, yet the day's residue remains. Sweat dries into salt on your skin. Dust clings to every fold of fabric. Relief exists only in comparison, not in comfort. Evening is not leisure, it is transition. There is food to prepare, tools to set aside, animals to secure. Light fades quickly, and with it comes a different set of risks. Darkness brings insects in greater numbers. Mosquitoes gather. Bites are unavoidable. Illness often begins this way, quietly, invisibly, long before symptoms appear. Dinner mirrors breakfast. Bread again, beer again, variety is rare. The purpose of eating remains the same. Maintain enough strength to wake up and repeat the process. Fires burn low. Smoke lingers inside homes with no chimneys, irritating eyes and lungs already strained by sand and labor. Conversation is subdued. Stories are shared, but carefully. Words carry weight. Speaking too freely invites attention, human or divine. Most people learn early that restraint is safer than honesty. The walls are thin. Ears are everywhere. Authority does not need to listen closely to be present. As darkness settles, religion reasserts itself. Prayers are spoken not out of ritual habit alone, but precaution. The gods are not distant concepts. They are forces believed to intervene directly. Protection is requested. Chaos is feared. Set, the embodiment of disorder, is always a possibility. Balance must be maintained, even overnight. Sleep offers no true escape. The mat is still rough. The floor still hard. Sand still finds its way into eyes, hair, and mouth. Bodies rest lightly, trained to wake at unfamiliar sounds. Snakes and scorpions are not abstract dangers. They are night visitors. When death eventually comes, as it does for everyone here, it is not treated as disappearance. It is relocation. But passage is conditional. A life must be accounted for. Words spoken, actions taken, obligations fulfilled. Judgment is expected. The heart, believed to contain memory and intention, is weighed, heavier than truth, and it is consumed, lighter, and the soul proceeds. This belief governs behavior more effectively than law. Fear of erasure surpasses fear of pain. Those who can afford it prepare extensively. Funerary texts, carved spells, offerings meant to sustain an afterlife imagined as a perfected version of this world, fields without exhaustion, harvests without labor, a Nile that nourishes without threatening. For the poor, preparation is modest, a simple burial, minimal goods, hope substitutes for material security. Inequality does not end with breath. It is carried forward. And yet, despite the hardship, people endure. They celebrate festivals. They laugh. They raise families. Music plays. Children grow. Meaning is constructed not from comfort, but from continuity. By modern standards, this life appears unbearable. By ancient standards, it is order, it is known, it is expected, and that expectation makes it survivable. To live one day in ancient Egypt is to submit completely to the sun, to labor, to belief, to hierarchy, to time itself. Survival is not heroic, it is procedural, and tomorrow, before the sun rises, it begins again. There is one more divide that shapes this world, and it is not made of stone or gold. It is made of knowledge. Writing exists everywhere around you, on walls, on tools, on monuments, but it does not belong to you. Hieroglyphs are beautiful, complex, and deliberately inaccessible. They are not decoration alone. They are power. To read and write is to control records, rituals, taxes, prayers, and memory itself. Very few people can do it. Literacy is rare, guarded, and trained from childhood. Scribes live differently. They do not haul stone. They do not labor in fields. Their hands remain soft because their value lies in symbols rather than strength. In a society where names preserve souls and erasure means annihilation, the ability to write determines who is remembered and who disappears. For everyone else, writing is sacred and distant. Names carved into stone ensure survival beyond death. Names destroyed mean oblivion. Even language participates in the afterlife economy. And this brings the day to its final reckoning. If you step back and look at this single day as a whole, stripped of romance and monuments, what remains is endurance. Heat endured, labor endured, hierarchy endured, faith endured. The system functions because it must, and because belief binds it together as tightly as stone binds a pyramid. Would a modern person survive this day without air conditioning, medicine, privacy, or choice? Probably not. But ancient Egyptians were not surviving despite the system. They were surviving within it. For them, this was not hardship. It was order. That is why this civilization lasted so long. Not because life was easy, but because it was understood. And when the sun rises again, it will not ask if you are ready. It never does. We leave the Nile behind and cross the ocean of time to a different continent, a different world, and a city that still refuses to explain itself. In the heart of ancient Mesoamerica, long before the Aztecs or the rise of European empires, there stood a city of stone, symmetry, and silence. Its true name has been lost. What we call it today was given centuries later by people who arrived to find it already abandoned. Teotihuacan, the place where gods were born. From a distance, the city does not look welcoming. Its scale is overwhelming. Wide avenues stretch forward with deliberate precision. Massive pyramids dominate the horizon, aligned not for beauty alone, but for meaning. This was not a settlement that grew naturally. It was designed at its height. Teotihuacan was one of the largest cities on Earth. Over 100,000 people lived here, housed in planned apartment compounds built from volcanic stone. This was urban life on a scale few places had achieved at the time. Trade networks reached far beyond the valley. Obsidian from this region traveled hundreds of miles. Artistic styles appeared in distant cities. Political influence followed. And yet, there is a strange absence at the center of it all. There are no kings' names carved into stone, no royal tombs, no written records declaring who ruled or how power was passed down. Teotihuacan did not leave behind the kind of narrative other civilizations did. Its authority was not personalized. It was embedded. The city itself was the message. At the end of its central avenue stands a structure unlike the others, not the largest, but perhaps the most unsettling. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent. Its facade is lined with stone heads protruding outward, mouths open, eyes wide. They do not smile. They warn. These are not passive decorations. They confront you as you approach. Repetition reinforces the effect. Dozens of identical faces, frozen in stone, creating the sense that the building itself is watching. This was intentional. The feathered serpent is a paradox made divine, a creature of earth and sky, of movement and stillness, of death and renewal. Long before later cultures softened this figure into a bringer of wisdom, here it carried weight and demand. This was a god that required balance to be maintained, and balance was not free. For years, the temple was admired for its architecture alone. Then, archaeology began to peel back the stone. Beneath the structure, hidden within its foundations, researchers found something far more disturbing than ceremonial offerings. Human remains, not scattered, not chaotic, arranged, dozens at first, then more. Eventually, over 200 individuals were uncovered. Young men, many with their hands bound behind their backs, some decapitated, others buried with obsidian blades, jawbone ornaments, and symbols of warrior status. These were not victims of disease or war left behind in haste. They were placed deliberately. The pattern mattered. Bodies were arranged according to direction and number, grouped with mathematical precision, accompanied by animals associated with power and the underworld. Jaguars, serpents, exotic shells brought from distant coasts. Every element carried meaning. This was not punishment. It was transaction. To understand this city, you must understand that sacrifice here was not hidden. It was foundational. Blood was not spilled as excess. It was offered as fuel. The act of building itself appears to have required it. Stone rose only after life was given. The temple was not built over death. It was built with it. Power in Teotihuacan did not announce itself through a single ruler. It manifested through ritual, alignment, and fear carefully structured into the urban landscape. When ceremonies took place, they were public. When sacrifices occurred, they were witnessed. The message was unambiguous. Order is maintained because the gods are fed, and the gods are fed because the city commands it. Standing here, even now, the effect lingers. This was not a place meant to comfort. It was meant to convince. And beneath the stone, deeper still, more secrets waited. Beneath the temple of the feathered serpent, the city continues downward. Long after the surface rituals ended and the plaza fell silent, the real architecture waited underground. Archaeologists eventually uncovered a sealed tunnel beneath the temple, deliberately closed nearly 2 millennia ago. This was not a crude passage. It was engineered, controlled, concealed with intention. The walls were once coated with reflective minerals that shimmered in torchlight, creating the illusion of a moving sky. Pools of liquid mercury filled recessed chambers, their surfaces mirroring light like dark water. The effect would have been disorienting, almost cosmic. A controlled descent into something that was not meant to feel earthly. Objects lined the passage, jade figures, obsidian blades, carved masks, rubber balls, offerings placed carefully, not as clutter, but as sequence. Each item had a role. Each placement suggested movement through stages, not storage. This tunnel was not for the dead alone. It appears to have been used for transformation. Some researchers believe it represented the underworld, a symbolic womb where creation myths were reenacted. Others suggest it functioned as a ceremonial space for initiation, where elite figures crossed from one state of authority into another. Whatever its precise purpose, one thing is clear. This was not a hidden afterthought. It was central to how the city understood power. Above ground, the city was rigid and ordered. Below ground, it became fluid, reflective, and mythic. Earth and sky were linked through ritual design. Teotihuacan was built as a cosmic map. The entire city aligns along deliberate axes. Its main avenue deviates from true north by a precise angle, one repeated across structures and platforms. This was not error. It was calibration. The layout appears synchronized with celestial events, possibly tied to the movements of Venus, a body deeply associated with war, sacrifice, and renewal throughout Mesoamerica. Timing mattered. When the planet rose or disappeared, rituals followed. Blood was offered not randomly, but according to cycles believed to sustain the universe itself. The city did not react to the heavens. It attempted to mirror them. Architecture here was not passive. It performed. The repetition of numbers, the symmetry of platforms, the rhythm of space and distance, all suggest a society deeply invested in aligning human action with cosmic mechanics. Time was not linear. It was circular. Events repeated because the universe demanded repetition. Sacrifice, in this context, was not cruelty. It was maintenance. And maintenance required authority. What made Teotihuacan especially effective was not just its belief system, but how it was displayed. Rituals were public. The plaza before the Feathered Serpent Temple could hold thousands. From elevated platforms, elites and priests looked down while ceremonies unfolded below. Bodies, blood, symbols, all visible. This was not hidden religion. It was staged conviction. Fear was not a byproduct. It was a feature. Foreign visitors would have witnessed this scale and intensity and carried the memory home. They would speak of the avenue, the pyramids, the sacrifices conducted under open sky. Teotihuacan did not need to conquer through armies alone. Its influence spread through awe and intimidation. Power radiated outward. Artifacts from this city appear hundreds of miles away. Obsidian blades, ceramics, murals, even political interference. In at least one known case, figures linked to Teotihuacan seem to have reshaped leadership in distant Maya cities, installing rulers aligned with their interests. And yet, for all this reach, The city left no written explanation, no inscriptions boasting victory, no monuments naming kings. Control here was institutional, not personal. The system mattered more than individuals. Authority was embedded in ritual, architecture, and shared belief. That system worked until it didn't. Signs of strain appear before the end: climate shifts, prolonged drought, agricultural pressure, social imbalance. When belief systems rely on cosmic order, environmental disruption becomes existential threat. Then came fire. Elite compounds show evidence of intentional burning, temples damaged, sculptures defaced, not by outsiders, but from within. Residential areas largely spared. This was not invasion, it was revolt. The sacred engine stalled. Rituals ceased. Trade collapsed. The city did not vanish overnight, but it hollowed out. Authority dissolved. Whatever council or priesthood once governed disappeared from the record. Teotihuacan fell silent. Centuries later, others arrived to ruins already ancient. They named the place. They told stories. They believed gods had once walked here. They were not entirely wrong. Even in ruin, Teotihuacan did not disappear. It transformed into memory. When later civilizations encountered the abandoned city, they did not see failure. They saw divinity. The scale alone suggested forces beyond human reach. The avenues, the pyramids, the symmetry carved into volcanic stone. This was interpreted not as the work of forgotten people, but as the imprint of gods. The Aztecs, arriving centuries later, named the city and absorbed its power into their own worldview. Teotihuacan became sacred ground, a place of origin, a mythic birthplace where the sun itself was believed to have been set into motion. The builders may have vanished, but their architecture continued to command belief. At the center of that belief stood the feathered serpent. This deity did not vanish with the city. It evolved. What began in Teotihuacan as a demanding cosmic force, one tied to sacrifice and order, later softened in narrative, but not in importance. Among the Toltecs and then the Aztecs, the feathered serpent became a god of knowledge, wind, renewal, and civilization. The same paradox remained earth and sky, creation and destruction, but its expression shifted with the needs of the society that inherited it. Myths changed. Stones stayed. Modern archaeology would eventually return to the site, not with offerings, but with instruments. Excavations in the 20th and early 21st centuries reopened sealed spaces that had not been touched since ritual hands closed them. Each discovery complicated the story. The tunnel beneath the temple of the feathered serpent, sealed deliberately, suggested a final act of closure. It was not abandoned casually. It was ended. Whatever rituals occurred there were concluded with intention, as if the city itself was being shut down from within. Thousands of objects recovered from that subterranean world spoke without words. They confirmed that Teotihuacan was not simply a city of buildings, but a system designed to connect realms, surface, and underworld, human and divine, present and eternal. Architecture functioned as theology, and theology functioned as governance. This is what made the city powerful, and what made its collapse so absolute. When belief fractured, nothing remained to hold it together. There was no dynasty to restore, no written law to reinterpret, no king to overthrow or replace. When the system failed, it failed everywhere at once. Today, visitors walk the Avenue of the Dead under open sky. Children run past serpent heads carved in stone. Cameras click. The plaza feels calm. But beneath the ground lie stories that never resolved. Lives given not as punishment, but as purpose. A city that believed blood sustained time. The temple of the feathered serpent remains, not as a warning, but as a question. How far will a civilization go to maintain order? What does power look like when it hides behind gods instead of faces? And when belief becomes architecture, what happens when faith collapses? Teotihuacan offers no answers. It offers evidence. And in that silence, its influence continues. What remains most unsettling about Teotihuacan is not what we have uncovered, but what was never written down. There are no confessions, no justifications, no final declarations explaining why so many lives were offered, why rituals demanded blood, or why an entire city was constructed to mirror the movements of the sky. The people who built this place left no voice behind, only structure. Stone replaced language. Geometry replaced narrative. And that may have been intentional. In Teotihuacan, meaning did not live in words. It lived in alignment, repetition, and scale. You were meant to feel order before you understood it. You were meant to witness power before you questioned it. Belief was not taught. It was imposed through space, ritual, and consequence. The temple of the feathered serpent stands as the clearest expression of that philosophy. It was not a sanctuary. It was an engine, a place where cosmology, authority, and fear converged into a single experience. The serpent heads did not invite worship. They demanded recognition. Even today, standing before them, the effect lingers. The carvings do not soften with time. They do not explain themselves. They stare outward, unchanged, as if the ritual never truly ended. Teotihuacan reminds us that civilizations do not always rule through charisma or kings. Some rule through systems so complete that no single leader needs to be remembered. Power becomes anonymous. Responsibility dissolves into ritual. And belief, once embedded deeply enough, can compel entire populations to participate in its maintenance, until it can't. When environmental stress, social strain, or internal fracture disrupted that balance, the system collapsed inward. Fire replaced ceremony. Silence replaced chant. The city emptied, not because it was conquered, but because its logic no longer held. Yet disappearance is not the same as erasure. The feathered serpent survived. The idea of cosmic order sustained by sacrifice survived. The architecture influenced generations who never knew the builders' names. Teotihuacan lived on as myth, as template, as warning. It shows us that beauty and terror are not opposites. They can be built together. That faith can unify as powerfully as it can destroy. And that, when humans bind their understanding of the universe too tightly to blood and fear, the structure may endure longer than the people, but it will not endure forever. Teotihuacan does not ask to be admired. It asks to be examined, because somewhere beneath the stone, beneath the tunnels, beneath the sacrifices and the stars, is a question that still has not faded. Was this the price of order? Long before writing fixed memory into stone or paper, humans found another way to remember. They used rhythm. Tens of thousands of years ago, before language settled into grammar, before symbols carried meaning, early humans began striking objects with intention. Hands against hollow wood, sticks against stone, feet against earth. What emerged was not music as we define it today, but patterned sound, repetition with purpose. The first drum was not an instrument. It was an extension of the body, a heartbeat projected outward. Archaeological traces of early percussion are rare because the materials did not last. Animal hides decayed, wood rotted, gourds collapsed, But absence of artifacts does not mean absence of practice. Anthropologists infer rhythm from behavior, communal movement, ritual spacing, coordinated action. Sound leaves no fossil, yet it leaves structure. In small groups gathered around fire, rhythm synchronized bodies. It regulated movement. It focused attention. It transformed scattered individuals into a single unit. In those moments, sound did something language could not yet do. It carried emotion without explanation. It created cohesion without instruction. Early drums served practical roles. A repeated beat could warn of danger. A change in tempo could signal gathering. Distance did not erase meaning. Rhythm traveled farther than voice, through forest, across valleys, over open ground. Communication did not require words to be understood, but rhythm was never only practical. It quickly became symbolic. As human societies formed rituals, birth, death, hunt, migration, rhythm anchored them. The steady pulse mirrored something deeply familiar. The sound humans heard first and longest. The heart. Rhythm felt safe, predictable, alive. Drumming was participatory. There was no audience. Everyone present contributed, whether striking, clapping, stomping, or moving. The boundary between sound and body dissolved. Rhythm was not performed. It was inhabited. Across continents, this pattern repeated independently. In Africa, in Asia, in the Americas, early cultures all developed percussive traditions without contact. The materials differed. The forms varied. The impulse was identical. Rhythm connected humans to forces they could not name. As belief systems formed, drums entered the sacred space, not as decoration, but as necessity. In ritual contexts, sound was believed to summon, guide, or contain the unseen. Spirits, ancestors, gods, whatever name a culture gave to forces beyond daily control were approached through rhythm. The drum became a voice for what could not speak. In many traditions, drums were treated as living entities, crafted with ceremony, named, fed with offerings. Their materials mattered. The tree, the animal, the maker, each contributed essence. To strike the drum was to activate a relationship. Rhythm also altered consciousness. Repetition at certain tempos affected breath, focus, and perception. Trance states emerged. Time felt different. The boundary between self and group blurred. This was not accidental. It was discovered, refined, and passed down long before formal religion. Rhythm structured spiritual experience. As societies grew more complex, drums followed. What began as communal pulse evolved alongside hierarchy, territory, and conflict. Rhythm did not disappear into abstraction. It adapted. When groups became armies, rhythm became command. Coordinated movement required signals that cut through chaos. Drums provided that clarity. A single pattern could mean advance. Another, retreat. Sound imposed order where vision failed. The same qualities that unified ritual circles now unified ranks of soldiers. Power learned to speak in rhythm. Drums announced authority. They marked entrances. They framed ceremonies. In courts and temples, percussion underscored presence. To hear the drum was to know power had arrived. Silence meant absence. Sound meant control. And yet, even as rhythm served command, it never lost its deeper function. It continued to carry memory, identity, resistance. Wherever humans were forced into silence, rhythm persisted. Across cultures, Rhythm split into two visible paths, but both came from the same origin. One path moved inward, toward ritual and communion. The other moved outward, toward coordination and dominance. In many African societies, drums became more than sound makers. They became language. Talking drums were shaped and tuned to mimic tonal speech, allowing messages to travel across miles. News of births, deaths, warnings, and gatherings moved through rhythm alone, meaning lived in pitch, spacing, and repetition. To the trained ear, the drum did not symbolize speech. It was speech. These systems were precise. A misplayed rhythm could distort meaning. Drummers were trained specialists, often holding respected or sacred positions. Knowledge was guarded, passed down through apprenticeship, not written instruction. Rhythm here was memory stored in muscle and timing. In ritual contexts, drums anchored spiritual exchange. Circles formed, movement followed sound, breath synchronized, the individual dissolved into the group. In those moments, identity became collective. The drum did not lead from the front, it pulled from the center. In the Americas, similar principles emerged independently. Indigenous tribes treated drums as living presences. The large communal drum represented the heartbeat of the earth itself. Played together, it aligned participants not just with one another, but with land, ancestry, and continuity. Ceremonies of healing, mourning, and vision relied on steady rhythm to open pathways beyond ordinary awareness. In Australia, percussion took subtler forms. Clapsticks and rhythmic footwork accompanied songlines, mapping geography through sound and movement. Rhythm preserved history without text. Paths across the land were remembered through cadence and repetition. To lose the rhythm was to lose the map. In the Arctic, frame drums guided shamans into altered states during long winters of isolation and darkness. Sound provided structure when environment offered none. Rhythm became orientation. These traditions share a core truth. Rhythm organizes experience when language fails. But as society centralized, rhythm was recruited for another purpose. In expanding states and empires, drums became instruments of command. Their ability to cut through noise and distance made them ideal for organizing large groups under stress. In battle, where sight was limited and confusion constant, rhythm imposed order. One pattern meant advance, another meant halt, another meant regroup. Sound replaced sight. In ancient China, large ceremonial drums coordinated troops and reinforced hierarchy. In Mesopotamia, temple drums announced rulers and summoned populations. Their resonance was not incidental. It was designed to intimidate. By the time empires matured, rhythm had become psychological architecture. Few forces understood this better than the Ottomans. Their military bands produced overwhelming walls of sound. Massive drums, cymbals, and horns played relentlessly before and during combat. Contemporary accounts describe enemies freezing, disoriented before contact even occurred. The rhythm did not threaten violence. It announced inevitability. In Europe, drums followed a more restrained path but served similar ends. Military drumming regulated marches, enforced discipline, and synchronized bodies into machinery. Time itself became standardized through rhythm. Movement obeyed beat, yet rhythm never fully belonged to power. Among enslaved populations, drums carried resistance. In the Americas, African rhythms survived displacement, repression, and prohibition. When drums were banned, bodies became percussion. Hands clapped, feet stomped, tables were struck. Rhythm adapted rather than vanished. Encoded patterns carried messages. Identity survived through timing and pulse. Even when stripped of language, rhythm remembered. The drum refused erasure. As centuries passed, these traditions did not remain isolated. They collided, blended, migrated. Sacred rhythms entered secular spaces. Military beats entered festivals. Ritual patterns became music. What once summoned spirits began to summon crowds. Rhythm crossed thresholds. By the early modern period, drums had entered theaters, courts, and processions. No longer solitary, they joined ensembles. Percussion began to separate into roles. Low tones anchored, higher tones articulated. Time became layered. The drum was no longer alone, and with that shift, something new approached. A moment when rhythm would be gathered, unified, and placed under the control of a single body. In crowded theaters and growing cities, percussion was expected to do more with less. Space was limited. Budgets were tighter. Ensembles needed efficiency. What had once required several players began to collapse into a single position. One person, surrounded by instruments, responsible for time itself. At the turn of the 20th century, this consolidation became mechanical. The invention of the bass drum pedal changed everything. With one foot, a drummer could now strike a large drum while hands remained free. Hi-hats followed. Toms were added. Cymbals rose on stands. What emerged was not a collection of parts, but a system. The drum kit was born. For the first time, rhythm was centralized within a single body. One performer could control pulse, texture, accent, and silence simultaneously. This was not merely convenience. It reshaped music. Timekeeping became expressive. Subtle shifts mattered. Groove emerged as a concept distinct from tempo. Jazz embraced this immediately. In smoky clubs, drummers stopped marking time and began shaping it. Syncopation bent expectations. Silence became as important as sound. The kit spoke conversationally, responding to soloists, pushing and pulling the flow. Drummers were no longer background support, they were narrators. As jazz evolved into swing and then into louder, amplified forms, the drum kit expanded. Rock demanded volume and endurance. Kits grew larger. Bass drums doubled. Toms multiplied. Cymbals spread outward like wings. The drummer became the engine, the force that carried energy forward. By the mid-20th century, rhythm defined identity. Genres separated not by melody alone, but by feel. Blues leaned into space. Rock emphasized drive. Funk fractured time into interlocking patterns. Each style treated rhythm differently, but all relied on the same foundation. The body behind the kit. And then, technology intervened. Electronic rhythm entered quietly, almost awkwardly. Early drum machines sounded rigid, synthetic, imperfect. But they offered something irresistible: precision, repeatability, control. Machines did not tire. They did not drift. They did exactly what they were told. Producers listened. When programmable drum machines arrived, rhythm detached from physical limitation. Patterns could loop endlessly. Sounds could be invented rather than struck. Entire genres emerged from this shift. Electronic music, hip-hop, techno, and later trap-built worlds from synthetic pulse. The famous machines became cultural icons, not because they imitated drums well, but because they did not try to. Their imperfections became signatures. A kick too deep, a snare too sharp. What was once considered artificial became authentic. Yet, the human element did not disappear. Electronic kits allowed drummers to trigger digital sounds through physical movement. Hybrid setups formed. Acoustic drums layered with samples. Human timing blended with machine stability. Rhythm entered a dialogue with itself. The drum did not lose its past. It absorbed it. Today, rhythm exists everywhere at once. In stadiums, in bedrooms, in software, in street performances. A single person can now produce what once required entire communities. And still, the core remains unchanged. Pulse organizes time. Rhythm binds bodies. Sound creates belonging. No matter how advanced the tools become, something essential persists. The reason rhythm mattered before language, the reason it guided ritual, war, healing, protest, and celebration. Because rhythm is not learned first, it is remembered. Across all these transformations, ritual to command, drum to machine, body to circuit, one constant remains. Rhythm has never been decoration. It has always been function. Before humans spoke in sentences, rhythm organized attention. Before laws were written, rhythm enforced coordination. Before belief was codified, rhythm shaped the experience of the sacred. It told people when to move, when to stop, when to gather, when to prepare, when to fear, and when to celebrate. Even now, long after rhythm has been digitized, compressed, sampled, and automated, it still bypasses analysis and goes straight to the body. A beat does not ask for permission. It enters. It synchronizes breath. It aligns movement. It creates agreement without debate. This is why drums appear everywhere humans do, in places of joy and places of conflict, in temples and on streets, in ceremonies meant to heal and in marches meant to resist. Rhythm does not belong to one culture or one era. It migrates because it is portable. It survives because it adapts. When words are censored, rhythm speaks. When memory is threatened, rhythm remembers. When communities fracture, rhythm pulls them back into alignment. Even in the most modern settings, stadiums filled with light, clubs vibrating with sub-bass, headphones sealing individuals into private worlds, the same ancient mechanism is at work. The body recognizes the pattern. Muscles respond. Time reshapes itself. And beneath all of it is the earliest sound any human ever knows. The steady pulse heard before sight, before language, before identity. The rhythm of another heart. That is why drums have endured longer than empires. Why they outlast technologies. Why they reappear after suppression. Why they cannot be erased. Because rhythm is not something humans invented. It is something we carry. And as long as there are bodies moving through time, there will be a beat marking the way forward. Before Manhattan became a forest of glass and steel, it was an island that stayed close to the ground. In the early 19th century, New York did not look upward. It spread outward. The city occupied the southern tip of the island, a dense patchwork of brick townhouses, wooden storefronts, churches, and dirt roads. Buildings rarely climbed beyond 5 or 6 stories, not because ambition was lacking, but because physics imposed limits no one could yet escape. Stone and brick were heavy. The higher a structure rose, the thicker its walls had to be at the base. That meant less usable space, higher costs, and increasing risk. Height was not an advantage. It was a liability. The city learned to stay low. Commerce filled the harbor. Ships crowded the piers. Horses and carts clogged narrow streets. Immigration surged. Capital flowed. Energy built. Yet the skyline remained modest. The tallest structures were not offices or homes, but churches. Trinity Church's spire dominated lower Manhattan, rising above everything else not as a symbol of progress, but of permanence. Below the streets, however, Manhattan possessed something quietly decisive, a foundation most cities did not have. Bedrock, deep, dense granite, lay beneath much of the island, especially in Midtown and lower Manhattan. For decades, it meant nothing. Builders did not yet know how to exploit it. But when technology caught up, that buried stone would change the fate of the city. The grid plan of 1811 accelerated this transformation. Streets were imposed northward with rigid logic, slicing the island into predictable blocks. The plan assumed expansion, not height. Growth was expected to move horizontally, lot by lot, block by block. No one yet imagined a city stacked vertically. Life in early Manhattan was noisy, crowded, and grounded. Markets bustled, workshops spilled into streets. Smoke hung low. The sky remained largely untouched. The idea of working dozens of floors above the street would have seemed impractical, even absurd. Then 2 inventions arrived, quietly at first, but with consequences that would rewrite urban history. The first solved a human problem. In 1852, Elisha Otis introduced a safety elevator that did something revolutionary. It removed fear. In a public demonstration, Otis stood on a raised platform, ordered the rope cut, and did not fall. A braking mechanism locked the lift in place. Gravity was no longer absolute. Before this moment, upper floors were undesirable. Climbing stairs was labor. The higher you lived or worked, the cheaper the space. Elevators reversed that logic almost overnight. Height became valuable. Light, air, and distance from the street turned into commodities. But moving people upward was only half the equation. The second invention solved a structural problem. Traditional buildings relied on load-bearing walls. As height increased, walls thickened, consuming space and limiting scale. Steel frame construction shattered that constraint. By transferring weight to an internal skeleton, buildings could rise without massive exterior walls. Facades became curtains rather than supports. Steel freed architecture from its own mass. By the late 19th century, Manhattan possessed everything needed to grow vertically. A booming economy, limited land, deep bedrock, elevators to move people, steel to hold weight. The question was no longer whether buildings could rise, but how far. The race began quietly, then aggressively. Newspapers were among the first to push upward. Height meant visibility. Visibility meant influence. The New York World Building claimed early dominance, only to be surpassed by rivals. Each new tower became a statement, not just of engineering, but of identity. Banks followed. Insurance companies followed. Corporate power wanted a physical presence that could not be ignored. The skyline became a ledger of ambition. Construction sites multiplied. Steam shovels carved deep foundations into granite. Steel beams rose floor by floor. Riveters worked at heights with no harnesses, balancing on narrow girders as if the sky itself were solid ground. Many were immigrants. Their labor built a city they might never fully afford to inhabit. By the early 20th century, Manhattan had changed its relationship with gravity. Height was no longer feared, it was pursued. But height alone was not enough. As the skyline climbed, it learned to perform. Architects began shaping towers, not just for function, but for image. The city entered an era where buildings competed visually, not only structurally. Stone and steel were sculpted into statements of elegance, dominance, and optimism. The skyline stopped growing quietly. The skyline learned to speak in style during the 1,920 seconds. This was not just an age of height, but of confidence. Manhattan entered a period where architecture stopped apologizing for ambition and began celebrating it. The Art Deco era transformed steel frames into symbols of speed, industry, and modern life. Buildings no longer hid their purpose, they dramatized it. Nowhere was this more visible than in the Chrysler Building. Completed in 1930, the tower did not simply rise. It arrived. Its stainless steel crown, assembled in secret and hoisted into place overnight, turned the building into an act of architectural theater. Sunlight caught the metal and scattered it across the skyline. Ornamental eagles, inspired by automobile hood ornaments, projected from its corners like mechanical guardians. This was not subtle design. It was intentional spectacle. The Chrysler Building briefly claimed the title of tallest structure in the world, but height was only part of its message. The building represented speed, luxury, and technological optimism. It was a monument to the machine age, a declaration that industry itself had become beautiful. But Manhattan did not pause to admire. Just blocks away, another project was already pushing higher. The Empire State Building rose with astonishing speed. Construction began during economic collapse at the depths of the Great Depression, when uncertainty defined the nation. Yet the project moved forward relentlessly. Steel climbed day after day. Floors stacked upward with disciplined efficiency. In just over a year, the building was completed. At 1,250 feet, it shattered previous records. More importantly, it altered perception. The Empire State Building was not elegant in the same way as the Chrysler. It was decisive, direct, monumental. It stood as proof that even in crisis, Manhattan would build upward. For decades, it dominated the skyline. It became shorthand for the city itself. Together, these towers reshaped Manhattan's silhouette. Height was no longer experimental. It was expected. The skyline became layered, competitive, expressive. Buildings spoke not only of function, but of ideology, progress, resilience, control. Yet, beneath the glamour, the labor remained brutal. Iron workers balanced hundreds of feet above the ground, with minimal protection. Wind whipped across exposed beams. Safety regulations were limited. Death was not uncommon. Photographs from the era show men eating lunch on steel girders, suspended in open air, legs dangling above the city. These images became icons, but they also concealed risk normalized by necessity. The skyline was rising on human bodies. By the end of the 1,930 seconds, Manhattan had achieved a vertical identity unmatched anywhere else. The city was no longer defined by its harbor or its streets alone. It was defined by what stood above them. But history was about to intervene. War reshaped priorities. Materials were diverted. Construction slowed. When peace returned, Manhattan entered a new phase, one less decorative, more restrained. The age of corporate modernism approached. Glass replaced stone. Ornament disappeared. The skyline prepared to change its voice once again. When the war ended, Manhattan did not return to ornament. It moved toward efficiency. The post-war decades introduced a different language to the skyline, one built from glass, steel, and restraint. The international style rejected decoration in favor of clarity. Buildings became clean, rectangular, and disciplined. Form followed function with almost ideological commitment. The Lever House and the Seagram Building embodied this shift. Their curtain walls of glass reflected the city back onto itself, creating towers that appeared lighter, almost immaterial. These were not monuments to fantasy or spectacle. They were statements of order, rationality, and corporate confidence. Power changed how it looked. Where Art Deco celebrated ambition through drama, corporate modernism expressed authority through calm. The new skyline did not shout. It asserted. Floors stacked efficiently. Interiors were standardized. Offices multiplied. The city's vertical growth became an infrastructure for management, finance, and control. Zoning laws shaped this evolution. The 1916 zoning resolution and later revisions regulated mass and light, forcing setbacks and encouraging slimmer profiles. Towers stepped back from the street, creating terraces and air. The skyline became a negotiated form, part aspiration, part regulation. Below, the city adapted. Commuters flowed into vertical cores each morning and out again at night. Elevators became arteries. Lobbies became thresholds between public life and corporate space. The rhythm of the city synchronized to office hours, not daylight. By the late 20th century, Manhattan's skyline was no longer a race. It was a system. Then came rupture. On the 11th of September 2001, the city's vertical identity was violently interrupted. The loss of the World Trade Center was not just architectural, it was psychological. Two towers that had symbolized global commerce and modernity were erased in hours. The skyline lost a reference point. The city lost a sense of certainty. What followed was not immediate replacement, but hesitation. For years, Ground Zero remained open, contested, symbolic. Debates unfolded over memory, function, and height. Should the city rebuild taller? Should it preserve absence? Architecture became argument. When rebuilding finally began, it carried weight beyond engineering. One World Trade Center rose as both structure and statement. Its height, 1,776 feet, encoded history into measurement. Its form balanced security, symbolism, and visibility. The skyline spoke again, but cautiously. In the decades that followed, Manhattan entered another phase, one shaped by capital concentration, luxury, and extreme slenderness. Super-tall residential towers pierced the skyline like needles. Built for wealth more than population, they altered scale and shadow. These buildings did not announce collective progress. They marked individual accumulation. Many floors remained dark at night, occupied only by investment. The city rose, but fewer people lived in the rise. Yet, Manhattan continues upward. Not because it must, but because it can. Bedrock still waits below. Capital still demands vertical expression. The skyline remains a mirror of what the city values at any given moment. From low island to vertical metropolis, Manhattan's relationship with height tells a single story told in many voices. Technology enables it, economy drives it, culture shapes it, crisis interrupts it, and ambition returns it to motion. The skyline does not end. It recalibrates. What Manhattan ultimately built was not just height, but habit. Over generations, the city learned to think vertically. Land became an abstract constraint rather than a physical one. Value detached from square footage and attached itself to elevation, view, and separation from the street. Height promised distance from noise, from congestion, from other people. Verticality became a form of privilege. This transformation did not happen overnight. It was trained into the city. Each generation inherited a skyline that felt permanent, then altered it without hesitation. What once seemed impossible became normal. What once seemed excessive became expected. Architecture followed belief. As towers grew slimmer and taller, engineering chased precision. Wind, sway, and shadow became central concerns. Buildings were no longer static objects. They moved, they responded, they flexed. Tuned mass dampers stabilized structures hundreds of meters above ground. Glass was engineered to resist pressure and heat. Height became a controlled experiment repeated again and again. Yet beneath the technical mastery, a familiar tension returned. Who was the skyline for? Luxury towers rose faster than affordable housing. Offices emptied as work shifted away from centralized spaces. Vertical growth continued even as daily life reconfigured horizontally through networks and screens. Manhattan's skyline began to reflect not population density, but capital density. Still, the impulse to build upward did not fade. Height remains a language. Manhattan speaks fluently. It signals resilience after crisis, confidence after collapse, renewal after loss. Each new tower negotiates with those before it, adjusting proportion, light, and presence. The skyline is not frozen. It is in constant conversation with itself. From the harbor, the city still appears as a wall of intent. Glass catches the sun. Shadows stretch across avenues. The skyline reads like a timeline written in steel, ambition layered upon ambition, each era leaving its mark. Manhattan did not invent the skyscraper alone, but it perfected the idea that cities could define themselves by what rises above them. Verticality became identity, and yet the bedrock remains unchanged. Granite holds everything in place, indifferent to style or era. It does not care what rises above it. Towers come and go, names change, silhouettes shift. The foundation stays. Perhaps that is the quiet truth beneath the skyline. Manhattan reaches upward endlessly, but it is grounded by something it cannot alter. A reminder that even the most vertical city depends on what lies beneath. Height may define how the city is seen, but foundation defines whether it stands. Long before cities rose or monuments were carved, before writing systems or spoken languages took shape, human beings were already communicating through something more fundamental: rhythm. Not as music, not as art, but as instinct. A hand striking wood, a foot meeting earth, a pulse repeated until it became shared. Somewhere in that repetition, meaning emerged. The earliest drum was not invented, it was discovered. Anthropologists believe rhythmic percussion predates structured language by tens of thousands of years. Early humans did not name rhythm, they felt it. It mirrored the heartbeat, the breath, the cadence of walking, the cycles of night and day. When one person struck a surface and another responded, coordination formed. Rhythm created alignment. Alignment created group identity. The first drums were made from what survived: hollowed logs, animal skins stretched tight, gourds, stones. Nothing permanent, nothing ornamental. But these instruments were not trivial. They carried intention. A repeated beat could summon a group, warn of danger, mark a hunt, or signal a gathering. Sound traveled farther than sight. Rhythm crossed distance before words could. Drumming was never passive. It required participation. Bodies moved together. Hands struck in unison. In caves and open plains, rhythm transformed individuals into collectives. It synchronized emotion, fear, celebration, mourning, anticipation. Before stories were told, rhythm was felt. Before myths were spoken, They were beaten into the air. As human groups grew into tribes, rhythm took on responsibility. Drums became tools of memory. They marked rituals tied to birth, death, and transition. The beat did not describe these moments. It framed them. Rhythm told the body when something mattered. Across continents, this pattern repeated independently. In Africa, percussion became inseparable from social structure. Drums were carved with care, believed to hold spirit. The tree, the animal skin, and the maker were thought to coexist within the instrument. To strike a drum was not to play it, but to activate it. Rhythm summoned ancestors. It called the unseen closer. Talking drums emerged as language extensions. By adjusting pitch and tension, drummers mimicked tonal speech. Messages traveled across forests and villages without a single spoken word. News, warnings, deaths, births. Drums carried information encoded in rhythm long before alphabets existed. In the Americas, drums were understood as living entities. Native tribes treated them as the heartbeat of the earth itself. Large ceremonial drums were played communally, several people striking one surface in unity. No individual dominated the rhythm. The point was synchronization. To drum together was to align with nature, ancestors, and each other. In Australia, percussive sound anchored Dreamtime rituals. Foot stomps and clapsticks mapped creation stories onto land and movement. Rhythm was geography. In the Arctic, frame drums guided shamans into altered states during long winters of darkness. The beat was a vehicle, not entertainment. Across early civilizations, drums consistently occupied sacred space. They were not background, they were central. Rhythm did not accompany ritual, it was the ritual. As societies became more complex, rhythm followed power. Drums entered warfare. Armies needed coordination before commands could travel through chaos. In ancient China, massive drums signaled troop movements across wide terrain. Each pattern had meaning: advance, hold, retreat. Soldiers learned to obey rhythm instinctively. In Mesopotamia, temple drums announced rulers and marked public gatherings. Sound defined authority. In Rome, drums and percussion accompanied processions, reinforcing order and dominance. Rhythm disciplined bodies into formation. The Ottomans perfected this idea. Their military bands unleashed overwhelming waves of percussion before battle. The sound alone destabilized enemies. Fear arrived before soldiers did. Drums became psychological weapons, shaping emotion at scale. Power learned to speak in rhythm. But even under domination, drums resisted control. Enslaved Africans carried rhythmic memory into the Americas. Though drums were often banned, rhythm survived through coded clapping, stomping, and improvised percussion. Beats transmitted identity when language was stripped away. Rhythm became resistance. Across Asia, drums took a different path. Precision replaced intimidation. In India, rhythm evolved into structured dialogue. Tabla strokes were named, memorized, spoken. Drumming became linguistic. Each beat held semantic value. Rhythm was taught as vocabulary. In Japan, taiko drumming demanded physical discipline. Movements were deliberate, stances grounded. Rhythm was martial, spiritual, and communal. The body became part of the instrument. In Southeast Asia, drums guided layered orchestras. In Indonesia, kendang rhythms led gamelan ensembles, controlling tempo and emotional flow. Rhythm mirrored cosmic harmony rather than command. Across cultures, drums diverged in form but not in function. They shaped time. They directed bodies. They aligned groups toward shared purpose. With industrialization came consolidation. Separate percussion roles merged. By the early 20th century, multiple drums were arranged around a single player. Pedals allowed feet to strike bass drums. Hands controlled snare and cymbals. The drum kit was born out of efficiency. Jazz transformed it into expression. Drummers no longer marked time. They spoke through rhythm. Syncopation introduced tension and release. Swing redefined movement. The drum kit became conversational. Rock amplified it. Power increased. Kits expanded. Rhythm drove crowds. The drummer became engine rather than support. Then technology intervened. Analog drum machines introduced consistency. Digital systems introduced infinite variation. Rhythm could be programmed, repeated flawlessly, shared globally. Some feared the loss of human feel. Instead, hybridity emerged, human rhythm layered with machine precision. Today, rhythm exists everywhere. In software, in algorithms, in artificial systems trained to predict timing. Yet something remains unchanged. The human body still responds instinctively to percussion. A beat still bypasses analysis and reaches muscle, breath, and emotion directly. Rhythm did not evolve away from humanity. It evolved with it. And through every transformation from hollow logs to digital pads, the drum remained what it always was, a way to connect individuals into something larger, a method of organizing time, a reminder of shared pulse. This story is not finished yet. As rhythm spread across cultures, it adapted to materials, climate, and social structure. But its role remained constant. It organized people in space and time. It made collective action possible. Whether played softly in ritual or violently in war, the drum always functioned as a signal that something larger than the individual was happening. In many societies, drums were treated not as objects but as beings. They were named, they were fed with offerings, they were repaired with ceremony. A cracked drum was not simply broken, it was wounded. This belief reflected a deeper understanding. Rhythm was not external to life, it mirrored it. As religions formalized, drums entered theology. In Hindu cosmology, Shiva's Damaru marked the rhythm of creation itself. The universe expanded and collapsed in time with its beat. Sound preceded form. Rhythm preceded matter. In this worldview, percussion was not symbolic. It was structural. In Buddhist traditions, drums guided meditation. Slow, deliberate strikes regulated breath and attention. Rhythm became a tool for inner alignment. The drum was not there to excite the mind, but to quiet it. In African spiritual systems, drums became vehicles for possession. Rhythms were specific to deities. Play the correct pattern, and the god would arrive. Miss the pattern, and nothing happened. Precision mattered. Rhythm was invocation. Across the Americas, drums guided healing. Repetitive beats induced trance states. Shamans used rhythm to navigate altered consciousness, to retrieve lost aspects of the self, or to guide souls between worlds. The beat acted as a map. What emerges across these traditions is consistency. Rhythm was never decoration. It was function. It altered states. It organized belief. It made the invisible tangible. As societies expanded into empires, rhythm scaled with them. Large gatherings required synchronization. Festivals, coronations, executions, and mass rituals all depended on percussion to unify attention. The drum commanded crowds without language. This power made rhythm attractive to rulers. Control the beat, and you controlled the tempo of life. Work cycles, marches, ceremonies, Even punishment followed rhythmic structure. Time itself became regulated. Yet rhythm always retained an edge of unpredictability. It lived in the body. It could not be fully contained. Even the most rigid systems relied on human hands to maintain tempo. Fatigue, emotion, and variation slipped through. In the modern era, rhythm fragmented and multiplied. Recorded sound removed location from performance. A beat created in one room could travel globally. Cultures collided sonically. African rhythms entered jazz. Latin percussion reshaped pop. Electronic beats redefined dance. The drum kit became a hybrid machine. Foot and hand coordination allowed one person to express layered rhythm. Complexity condensed into a single performer. Rhythm became individual again, but amplified. Digital tools pushed this further. Software allowed beats to loop endlessly. Precision became absolute. Timing errors vanished. Rhythm could be visualized, quantified, edited, and yet audiences still responded most strongly to imperfection. Slight pushes and pulls in tempo, micro delays, human variance. The body recognized itself in those flaws. This revealed something essential. Rhythm is not about accuracy. It is about alignment. When people move together to a shared pulse, social boundaries soften, bodies synchronize, attention converges, identity momentarily dissolves into participation. This effect persists regardless of technology. Even today, crowds move instinctively to bass frequencies. Stadiums pulse, protest marches chant, clubs vibrate. Ritual has not disappeared. It has relocated. The drum remains central because it bypasses abstraction. It speaks directly to physiology. Heart rate adjusts, breath synchronizes, muscles respond. No translation required. This is why rhythm survives every technological shift, why it adapts without losing relevance, why it reappears wherever humans gather. And this is why the story of the drum cannot be confined to music history. It is a history of coordination, of belief, of power, of resistance, of memory carried through time by vibration rather than text. Rhythm is how humanity learned to act together before it learned to speak together. And that legacy continues. As rhythm continued to evolve, it followed humanity into its most intimate spaces. Homes, ceremonies, celebrations, grief. Drums were no longer confined to temples or battlefields. They entered daily life. Simple beats marked work cycles, rowing strokes, harvesting rhythms, and communal labor. When many bodies moved together, rhythm prevented chaos. It reduced fatigue. It created flow. In agrarian societies, rhythm synchronized effort. Planting, threshing, grinding grain, each task developed its own tempo. The drum was sometimes literal, sometimes implied. A clap, a chant, a repeated strike. The body learned when to push and when to rest. Rhythm conserved energy long before science explained efficiency. As trade networks expanded, rhythms traveled with people. Instruments crossed borders. Patterns mutated. What began as sacred became social. What began as functional became expressive. The drum absorbed identity without losing universality. This adaptability explains its survival. Unlike language, rhythm does not require shared symbols. Unlike writing, it does not demand literacy. Unlike architecture, it does not require permanence. Rhythm exists only when activated. It lives in time, not space. This makes it resilient. Colonial expansion attempted to suppress indigenous rhythms. Drums were banned, broken, silenced. Authorities recognized their power to unite, but rhythm adapted. It hid in footsteps, in work songs, in coded claps. Even when stripped of instruments, the beat survived in the body. When suppression lifted, rhythm returned louder. In the 20th century, recorded sound transformed access. For the first time, rhythm could be replayed identically. This changed how humans related to time. A beat could repeat endlessly without fatigue. Consistency became normal. But consistency altered expectation. Listeners grew accustomed to precision. Deviations stood out. Human timing felt loose, imperfect, yet emotionally richer. This tension reshaped music. Genres formed around mechanical timing. Others resisted it. Hip-hop emerged from this collision. Drum machines provided structure. Human voices provided variation. The beat anchored identity. Sampling allowed old rhythms to speak in new contexts. Memory became audible. Electronic dance music extended this further. Rhythm dominated space. Clubs became modern ritual sites. Lights replaced fire. Bass replaced chant. Bodies moved together in darkness, guided by pulse alone. No narrative required. The function mirrored ancient gatherings. Synchronization, release, belonging. Meanwhile, traditional drumming never vanished. Indigenous communities preserved ceremonial rhythms across generations. Transmission remained oral and embodied. Patterns were memorized, not written. The beat carried lineage. Modern percussionists began blending traditions. African polyrhythms met jazz improvisation. Latin percussion fused with rock. Asian rhythms entered film scores. Global rhythm became a shared language without erasing origin. This created a paradox. Rhythm was everywhere, yet still deeply personal. Neuroscience began to explain why. Studies showed that rhythmic synchronization increased trust. It boosted cooperation. It released bonding chemicals in the brain. Moving in time with others created social cohesion at a biological level. Human beings were wired for rhythm. This realization reframed the drum's role. It was no longer just cultural or historical. It was neurological, evolutionary. Rhythm predated civilization because it supported survival. Groups that moved together survived together. Even now, this persists. Military training relies on cadence. Exercise uses tempo. Therapy uses rhythm to rehabilitate motor function. Education uses clapping to teach memory. The drum quietly organizes modern life, as it always has. Technology did not replace rhythm. It amplified it. Artificial intelligence can now generate beats. Algorithms predict tempo. Software imitates groove. Yet, something remains unreachable. Intention, context, presence. A drum played by a human carries micro-decisions, pressure, timing, emotion, fatigue. These subtleties cannot be fully encoded. They are lived. Which brings us back to the core truth. Rhythm is not sound alone. It is relationship. Between bodies, between moments, between intention and response. The drum has never been about noise. It has always been about connection, and that is why it continues. As rhythm entered the modern age, it became inseparable from identity, not just cultural identity, but personal identity. People no longer only belong to tribes or nations. They belong to sounds, genres, beats. A rhythm could define who you were, where you came from, and how you moved through the world. Music scenes formed around shared pulses. Jazz clubs, hip-hop block parties, underground raves, drum circles in parks. Each space used rhythm to draw invisible boundaries. If you felt the beat, you belonged. If you didn't, you stood outside it. The drum became a marker of self. This shift did not erase its ancient function, it reframed it. Rhythm still synchronized bodies, but now it also synchronized values, attitudes, and expression. Tempo reflected worldview. Slow, repetitive beats invited introspection. Fast, aggressive rhythms released tension. Complex polyrhythms mirrored layered identities. Film and media accelerated this effect. Percussion underscored emotion before dialogue ever spoke. A rising rhythm built anticipation. A sudden stop created dread. Drums trained audiences to feel before they understood. The body reacted first. The mind followed. Advertising learned this quickly. Rhythm sold products. Politics learned it too. Campaign rallies used cadence. Chants simplified ideology into pulse. Repetition made belief memorable. The drum did not argue. It affirmed. Even silence became rhythmic. Pauses gained meaning. Space between beats carried tension. Modern rhythm was no longer just sound. It was structure. In education, rhythm supported learning. Children remembered information better when paired with tempo. In therapy, drumming helped trauma survivors regulate emotion. Rhythm restored predictability when the nervous system had lost it. This revealed something profound. Rhythm is safety. Predictable beats reassure the body. They establish expectation. They signal continuity. When the world feels chaotic, rhythm offers structure without explanation. It does not require understanding. It requires presence. This is why drums appear in moments of crisis. Vigils, protests, funerals, celebrations after disaster. When words fail, rhythm remains. The digital age intensified exposure. Beats now surround daily life. Notification sounds, crosswalk signals, fitness trackers, even machines communicate rhythmically. Time itself is increasingly measured through pulses. Yet despite saturation, the effect does not weaken. The human nervous system still responds. A low frequency still grounds. A steady tempo still calms or excites. Technology changed delivery, not impact. Hybrid drummers emerged. Artists who combined acoustic kits with electronic triggers. Hands struck skin while sensors activated samples. Old and new coexisted in a single gesture. Tradition did not disappear. It adapted. Global collaboration followed. A rhythm recorded in one country could anchor a song built across continents. Culture moved at tempo. But beneath all innovation, one fact remained unchanged. The drum has no narrative. It has no inherent meaning. It becomes meaningful only through use, through context, through intention. This is why it survives ideology, why it transcends language, why it appears in every civilization independently. It does not tell humans what to think. It tells them when to move. And movement is the oldest agreement humans ever made. Long before laws, before stories, before gods were named, bodies moved together. They learned that coordination increased survival, that shared rhythm created trust, that timing mattered. The drum did not teach humanity these truths. It revealed them. As rhythm embedded itself deeper into modern life, it began to shape not only how people gathered, but how they remembered. Memory itself became rhythmic. Songs anchored eras. Beats marked personal milestones. A certain tempo could return someone instantly to a moment, a place, a feeling. The drum became a vessel for time travel. This is why rhythm is so closely tied to nostalgia. The brain encodes memory alongside repetition. A familiar beat triggers recall before conscious thought engages. Emotion arrives first. Logic follows later. Rhythm bypasses explanation and moves straight to recognition. Cultures understood this long before neuroscience did. Ritual rhythms were repeated exactly so memory would survive across generations. Change the beat too much, and meaning slipped. Consistency preserved identity. Rhythm became cultural inheritance. As societies fractured and reformed, rhythm adapted to new forms of belonging. Urbanization separated people from ancestral rituals, but new rhythms filled the gap. Street percussion, club beats, marching chants, stadium drums. Each created temporary tribes bound by pulse rather than blood. This explains why rhythm thrives in crowds. When hundreds or thousands of bodies move to the same beat, individuality recedes. The nervous system aligns. A sense of unity emerges without instruction. The drum does not demand agreement, it creates it. At the same time, rhythm became a site of innovation. Musicians pushed boundaries, exploring asymmetry, odd time signatures, broken patterns. Complexity replaced repetition. This mirrored modern life, fragmented, accelerated, unpredictable. Yet even the most complex rhythms relied on an underlying pulse. Without it, movement collapsed. Chaos required structure to exist at all. This tension between freedom and order has always defined rhythm. Too rigid, and it becomes mechanical. Too loose, and it dissolves. The drum sits at the balance point, allowing variation without losing cohesion. In contemporary culture, rhythm now competes with distraction. Attention spans shorten, silence shrinks. Yet drums still cut through noise. A low-frequency pulse demands attention. The body notices even when the mind resists. This is why percussion dominates public space. Construction sites, traffic signals, emergency alerts. Sound designers rely on rhythm because it cannot be ignored. It registers physically. Even virtual environments replicate this. Video games use rhythmic cues to guide action. Virtual reality uses haptic pulses to anchor immersion. Digital worlds still need rhythm to feel real. And so, the drum enters a paradoxical phase. It is everywhere, yet still primal. It exists inside advanced software, yet remains rooted in skin, wood, and air. It belongs to ancient rituals and futuristic simulations simultaneously. No other human creation bridges time this cleanly. The drum does not evolve linearly. It accumulates. Every new form contains the old. Every innovation echoes a first strike on hollow wood. This continuity explains why rhythm resists obsolescence. Technologies age, interfaces change, beats persist. Because rhythm is not a tool humans invented. It is a pattern humans recognized. And recognition is permanent. As rhythm continued to assert its presence across eras, it revealed another role that had always existed beneath the surface: regulation. Rhythm did not only unite or express, it regulated bodies, labor, emotion, and time itself. Long before clocks were common, rhythm was how humans measured duration. A certain number of beats marked an action. A cycle of rhythms marked a day. Repetition created predictability. Work followed rhythm because the body required it. Too fast and energy collapsed. Too slow and efficiency vanished. The drum, or its implied beat, taught balance without instruction. Labor songs, rowing chants, and marching cadences all served the same purpose. They aligned effort. They prevented exhaustion. They made endurance possible. This principle extended into modern industry. Assembly lines adopted tempo. Productivity followed rhythm even when no drum was present. Machines inherited the logic of the beat. Repetition optimized output. Time was sliced into pulses. But regulation cuts both ways. The same rhythmic discipline that enabled cooperation also enabled control. Factories enforced tempo. Militaries drilled cadence into muscle memory. Schools rang bells. Prisons scheduled movement. Rhythm structured obedience as effectively as it structured survival. This dual nature has always existed. Rhythm liberates and constrains. It synchronizes and subdues. The difference lies in who controls the beat. When rhythm is shared, it empowers. When imposed, it disciplines. This distinction explains why drumming often appears at moments of protest. Demonstrations adopt chants and percussion not merely for volume, but for coordination. Rhythm turns a crowd into a single moving entity. It transforms scattered voices into force. The beat becomes ownership of time and space. Throughout history, authorities understood this instinctively. Suppress the drum, suppress unity. This is why drums were banned among enslaved populations, why percussion was restricted in occupied regions, why spontaneous rhythm was treated as threat. Yet rhythm never disappeared. It adapted. It waited. When allowed to re-emerge, it did so explosively. New musical movements often coincided with social change. Jazz during cultural shifts, rock during generational rebellion, hip-hop during urban marginalization. Rhythm articulated realities that language could not yet stabilize. The drum became testimony. In the digital era, this function persists but transforms. Online communities synchronize through shared media. Beats circulate faster than geography allows. A rhythm can unite strangers across continents in seconds. Physical proximity is no longer required for collective movement. Yet the body still responds as if it were present. Neural studies show that rhythmic synchronization increases empathy even when participants are separated. Shared tempo creates perceived connection. Distance collapses. The drum no longer needs a circle. It creates one virtually. Still, there remains a difference between hearing a beat and making one. Striking a drum involves resistance, weight, rebound, feedback. The body negotiates with material. This interaction produces nuance. Digital rhythm can imitate sound, but not effort. The distinction matters. This is why live percussion continues to hold power, even in a synthesized world. Audiences recognize labor. They feel energy transferred. Sweat matters. Breath matters. The beat carries proof of presence. In this sense, the drum remains an artifact of embodiment in an increasingly disembodied culture. It reminds humans that time is felt, not just counted. Every beat occupies space. Every rhythm consumes effort. This grounds experience. As long as human bodies exist, rhythm will not disappear. It may change interface. It may change texture, but its role remains intact. The drum is not a relic. It is infrastructure. As rhythm carried humanity forward, it began to intersect directly with meaning itself. Not symbolic meaning, but existential meaning. The kind that answers why people gather, why they endure, why they repeat actions even when survival no longer depends on them. Rhythm became a way of affirming existence. To strike a drum is to declare presence. A beat says, "I am here." A repeated beat says, "We are still here." This is why drums appear in moments of transition. Births, deaths, initiations, endings, beginnings. Rhythm marks thresholds. Across cultures, this function remained constant, even as beliefs changed. Whether framed as communion with gods, alignment with nature, or expression of identity, rhythm operated at the same layer of human experience. It structured moments that words could not stabilize. Modern society often mistakes rhythm for entertainment. But this is a shallow reading. Entertainment is a byproduct, not the function. The function is regulation of emotion, reinforcement of belonging, and reinforcement of continuity across time. This becomes especially clear in moments of collective loss. After disasters, communities gather. Candles are lit, drums sound. The beat is slow, steady, grounding. It does not explain grief, it holds it. Rhythm provides a container when language collapses under weight. This capacity explains why percussion appears in memorials, vigils, and remembrance ceremonies across cultures. Silence is powerful, but rhythm sustains presence within silence. It keeps attention from drifting. It keeps the body anchored. As life accelerates, this anchoring becomes more valuable, not less. The modern world fragments attention relentlessly. Screens divide focus. Schedules compress time. Rhythm counters this fragmentation. A steady beat demands continuity. It insists on duration. It forces the body to stay with the moment. This is why rhythmic practices resurface during periods of anxiety and instability. Drumming circles, breathwork with tempo, guided rhythmic meditation. These are not trends, they are corrections. The nervous system seeks rhythm when overwhelmed. Even clinical environments now acknowledge this. Rhythmic stimulation is used in rehabilitation, trauma therapy, and neurological recovery. Patients relearn movement through tempo. Rhythm rebuilds pathways when cognition alone fails. The implication is unavoidable. Rhythm is foundational to human regulation. Strip away culture, belief, technology, and ideology, and rhythm remains. It predates all systems humans built to explain themselves. It operates beneath explanation. This is why the drum endures where other artifacts fade. It requires no translation. It adapts without losing essence. It scales from individual to crowd without distortion. And, crucially, it resists ownership. No civilization owns rhythm. No ideology controls it permanently. Attempts to monopolize it always fail. The beat slips through restrictions, reappears elsewhere, mutates, survives. The drum belongs to the body first. As long as humans breathe, their bodies produce rhythm, heartbeat, gait, pulse. The drum externalizes what is already internal. It does not impose structure. It reveals it. This continuity across millennia is not accidental. It is biological. Cultural forms change, but the underlying response remains intact, which brings part 5 toward its final realization. The story of rhythm is not a story of music. It is a story of humanity learning how to stay together in time. As rhythm approaches its modern threshold, one final realization emerges. Despite all transformations, ritual to performance, community to industry, flesh to circuitry, the drum never lost its original function. It kept humans synchronized with time itself. Time is abstract. Rhythm makes it physical. A beat gives time edges. It creates before and after. It turns flow into structure. Without rhythm, time dissolves into noise. With rhythm, it becomes navigable. This is why humans instinctively impose tempo on chaos. It restores orientation. In this sense, the drum is not about sound. It is about order, but not imposed order, lived order. Rhythm does not demand belief. It does not require agreement. It simply offers a shared reference point. You can step into it or step away, but once inside, the body responds automatically. Breath aligns, movement adjusts, attention sharpens. This universality explains why rhythm remains central even as belief systems collapse or evolve. When gods disappear, the drum remains. When languages fade, the beat survives. When empires fall, rhythm continues beneath the ruins. It is not preserved in archives. It is preserved in bodies. Every generation rediscovers rhythm without instruction. Children drum instinctively. Feet tap without teaching. Hands strike surfaces in moments of boredom, excitement, or stress. This is not learned behavior. It is recall. The drum is memory without narrative. As technology advances further toward virtual environments, artificial intelligence, and disembodied interaction, the drum gains new significance. It anchors the human element. It reminds us that experience is temporal, not just informational. You can simulate sound. You can calculate tempo. You can predict groove. But you cannot simulate presence. Presence requires bodies sharing time. Rhythm makes that sharing possible. This is why live percussion still matters, why crowds still respond, why silence before a beat feels heavy, why the first strike still carries weight. The drum does not compete with the future. It survives it, because the future still unfolds in time, and time still needs structure, and structure still begins with rhythm. Long before humanity knew who it was, it learned how to move together. Long after technologies fade, that impulse will remain. The drum is not humanity's first instrument. It is humanity's first agreement. And it continues. As the story reaches its final horizon, one truth becomes unavoidable. Civilizations rise, fracture, and vanish. But the human need to make sense of existence never disappears. Tools change. Beliefs evolve. Structures collapse and are rebuilt. Yet beneath all transformation, humans continue searching for continuity, something that holds meaning steady while everything else moves. That search has always followed the same path. Time, memory, identity. Every civilization attempts to solve the same problem: how to remain coherent while time erodes certainty. Myths are created to explain origins. Monuments are built to defy decay. Records are written to preserve knowledge. But none of these are enough on their own. They require interpretation. They depend on language. They fracture when context is lost. Rhythm does not. It requires no translation. It survives without text. It carries meaning without explanation. A beat remains a beat, regardless of who hears it. This is why rhythm appears at both the birth and the collapse of civilizations. When systems fail, rhythm persists. The drum becomes a witness. It does not document events. It absorbs them. It carries the emotional residue of human experience forward through repetition. Every strike echoes all previous strikes. Not metaphorically, but structurally. Rhythm accumulates history through continuity, not description. This is why humanity returns to rhythm during moments of uncertainty, when identities blur, when belief systems fracture, when futures feel unstable. The drum does not promise answers. It offers orientation. To move in time together is to affirm shared existence. As civilizations advanced, they layered meaning on top of this instinct. Gods were named. Philosophies were formalized. Nations were imagined. But rhythm remained beneath them all, unchanged. It did not argue with ideology. It adapted to it. Even the most technologically advanced societies still rely on rhythm to regulate life. Calendars divide time into repeating units. Clocks pulse, schedules beat. Entire economies function on cycles. Civilization itself is rhythmic. This reveals a subtle reversal. Humans did not invent rhythm to organize society. Society emerged because humans already understood rhythm. The heartbeat taught timing. Walking taught tempo. Breath taught pacing. From biology emerged coordination. From coordination emerged cooperation. From cooperation emerged culture. The drum externalized this internal order. It made the invisible visible. It allowed humans to hear what their bodies already knew. As humanity looks forward toward automation, virtuality, artificial intelligence, the question is not whether rhythm will survive. It is how it will continue to anchor identity when physical presence becomes optional. Digital spaces already attempt to simulate rhythm. Notifications vibrate. Interfaces animate. Feedback pulses. These are not aesthetic choices. They are physiological accommodations. Systems mimic rhythm because humans require it to feel real. Yet something is always missing. Disembodied rhythm lacks resistance. It lacks effort. It lacks consequence. The body responds differently when it must move, strike, breathe, or coordinate in real space. This difference matters, which is why, even in a future of abstraction, humans will return to physical rhythm, to drums, to movement, to shared tempo, not out of nostalgia, but necessity. The drum does not belong to the past. It belongs to continuity. It bridges eras without belonging fully to any of them. It carries humanity's earliest instinct into its most complex futures. It reminds us that before we were thinkers, builders, or believers, we were bodies moving together in time. This is not philosophy. It is pattern, and patterns persist. As the final threads begin to align, the question is no longer about history, technology, or culture. It is about continuity. What carries forward when everything else changes? Civilizations are remembered through fragments, ruins, texts, images, artifacts. But these fragments require reconstruction. They demand interpretation. They are silent unless someone speaks for them. Rhythm, by contrast, does not wait to be translated. It activates the moment it is encountered. This immediacy is its power. A beat does not explain itself. It simply exists in time, and the body responds. Across eras, across belief systems, across technological thresholds, that response remains consistent. The body recognizes tempo before the mind assigns meaning. This recognition creates coherence, where explanation fails. This is why rhythm often appears where language breaks down, in grief, in awe, in fear, in moments that overwhelm articulation. The drum does not compete with silence. It frames it. It allows emotion to move without requiring narrative. As societies became more complex, humans relied increasingly on abstraction. Symbols replaced direct experience. Systems replaced instinct. Yet rhythm continued to function as a corrective. When abstraction drifted too far from lived reality, rhythm pulled attention back into the body. This tension defines the modern condition. We live surrounded by representations, screens, data, simulations. Much of human interaction now occurs without shared physical presence. Time is compressed, experience is mediated. Identity becomes fragmented across platforms. And yet, when people seek grounding, they turn toward rhythm. They gather for live music. They move together in protest. They train their bodies to tempo. They breathe in counts. They run with cadence. These actions are not nostalgic, they are regulatory. The nervous system seeks alignment when cognition overloads. Rhythm restores proportion. This does not mean humanity will reject technology. It means technology will continue to borrow from rhythm to remain usable. Every interface pulse, every animation curve, every haptic vibration is an attempt to translate digital abstraction back into bodily time. But translation is not replacement. There remains a difference between experiencing rhythm and simulating it, between moving together and observing movement, between striking a surface and hearing a sound. These differences are subtle but consequential. They shape how humans feel connected, present, and real. This is why the drum persists as a physical act. It demands engagement. It resists passivity. To drum is to participate in time, not consume it. This participation creates responsibility. You must maintain tempo. You must listen. You must adjust. Rhythm teaches cooperation without instruction. In this sense, the drum models a way of being that modern systems often struggle to replicate: mutual responsiveness, shared timing, collective awareness. As humanity faces accelerating change, these qualities become increasingly valuable. The future will require coordination across difference, cooperation without uniformity, alignment without erasure. Rhythm offers a framework for this. It allows many voices to move together without becoming identical. Polyrhythm demonstrates this truth clearly. Multiple patterns coexist, each independent, yet aligned to a shared pulse. No single rhythm dominates. Balance emerges through relationship, not hierarchy. This principle extends beyond music. It suggests a model for coexistence, for identity, for continuity amid diversity. And this may be the drum's final lesson. As everything converges, the final understanding becomes clear. Humanity's story is not a straight line of progress. It is a cycle of remembering and forgetting, of building and rebuilding, of abstraction drifting too far and then being pulled back by something more fundamental. That corrective force has always been rhythm. Not because rhythm is powerful in isolation, but because it aligns humans with reality as it is lived. Time does not move in concepts. It moves in intervals. Bodies do not respond to theories. They respond to tempo. Civilization can invent countless systems to manage itself, but underneath them all, life still unfolds, beat by beat. This is why the drum outlasts empires. Stone crumbles. Languages die. Belief systems fracture. Technologies obsolete themselves. But rhythm does not depend on permanence. It depends on repetition. As long as there is breath, there is tempo. As long as there is movement, there is timing. The drum does not preserve knowledge the way books do. It preserves continuity. It ensures that even when meaning is lost, connection remains possible. Two people do not need shared language to move together. They need shared time. This may be the most important inheritance humanity carries forward. In a world increasingly defined by speed, fragmentation, and distance, rhythm offers a counterbalance. It slows without stopping. It accelerates without losing coherence. It allows difference without disintegration. This is not idealism. It is mechanics. When humans align in time, cooperation increases. When tempo fractures, systems strain. History reflects this pattern repeatedly. Periods of cohesion are rhythmic. Periods of collapse are arrhythmic. Even now, beneath global networks and digital abstraction, Humanity still negotiates its future through timing, through cycles, through pulses of attention, labor, rest, and renewal. The drum does not solve humanity's problems. It reminds humanity how to face them together. And that may be enough, because before humanity learned how to build upward, to write history, to conquer land, or to imagine futures, it learned something simpler and more durable. It learned how to move together. It learned how to listen. It learned how to keep time. And as long as time continues, that knowledge will not disappear. History isn't boring. It's just rarely told right. This is the boring library.